Leader of the third party.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. A recent poll from Vancouver found that 80% of people are concerned with public safety in the downtown core. More than half said this provincial government is doing a poor job of addressing it. That's in part because this government is using an old playbook from its predecessors, sweeping the streets without proper housing in place and pretending that somehow hundreds of unhoused people will simply disappear. It doesn't work. Hundreds of people still gather on the streets in the downtown east side because the reality is there is nowhere for them to go. SROs and shelter spacers are not a viable option. People need safe housing, a door that locks, access to mental and physical health services, community support. They need a safe place to sleep. They need support in the form of transitional housing. That's the government's job, and it's one they've been stumbling on. My question through you, Honourable Speaker, is to the Premier. There are tens of thousands of people experiencing homelessness in BC. What is his government's strategy for transitional housing?
Minister of Housing.
Thank you so much, Honourable Speaker, and thank you to the member for the question. I would agree with the member that everyone deserves to have the supports that they need to get on their feet. I agree with the member that everyone deserves to have mental health supports, other types of supports that are needed to get the stability in their lives. I disagree with the member when the member asserts that there's nowhere to go. We have, Honourable Speaker, been creating spaces, in particular around the downtown east side, around the encampments on Hastings Street, for people to go. We have shelter spaces available for people. We've said many times, and I hope the member can agree with this, that the encampments are not safe, that the shelter spaces that we have available are safer than the encampment, certainly what we've seen on Hastings Street. And so we continue to have the spaces available. We have staff that are on the ground working with people, encouraging them to take the shelter spaces. The shelter spaces is where we do the assessments of people's needs. Once we have identified the needs of individuals, then we move them into other locations. The member would be correct to say that some SROs are not in good shape. And certainly the Premier and I have said it many times that we need to work with Canada, we need to work with the City of Vancouver on a strategy on replacing some of the SROs. But even the activists on the ground will tell you, Honourable Speaker, that majority of the SRO spaces are absolutely necessary to ensure that we have housing for people. And so, yes, we're opening up new units. 330 we had committed to by end of June. We actually bought Chalmers Lodge, which is opening. 95 spaces opened 2 weeks ago for occupancy permit. People are moving in right now. We are close to opening up the next 95 as well. We're just waiting on occupancy permits. We're continuing to move people out of shelters into the housing units, Honourable Speaker, and that's our goal. For too long, no one stepped up to say that we want to take responsibility for the people of downtown East Side. Premier has stepped up and said, yes, you know what, enough is enough. We're going to do that. We're going to continue to do that work.
Leader of third party supplemental.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I asked specifically about the strategy for transitional housing. What the Minister of Housing wanted to speak about was shelter spaces. And let's be clear, shelter spaces are in no way a form of housing. You have to leave first thing in the morning. You can't come till the end of the day. Your belongings can't stay in a place. There is no door that locks. There is no safe place to sleep. This government doesn't appear to have a coherent strategy for transitional housing, but others do. Others have stepped up. I spoke earlier this month about the Village project in Duncan. People get their own space to call home, a door that locks, they get mental, physical, medical, spiritual support. The tiny homes create a community of support. It's cost effective, it's fast to build, and importantly, it's proven to work. The Village project in Duncan has been so successful. Other communities, and I heard from them at AVICC 2 weekends ago, other communities are seeking support from this provincial government so that they can have the same projects in their communities. It begs the question of why this government hasn't come out with plans to expand this model province-wide. My question, Honourable Speaker, is to the Premier. Why is the government and BC Housing not adding this successful model of transitional housing into the continuum of housing solutions?
Minister of Housing.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. And just to finish off the last question, 1,400 new supportive housings units that are either built or underway in the City of Vancouver, Honourable Speaker. We have been doing that work. Decades of underinvestment in housing, and we're making those investments as we speak, not only in Vancouver, but in communities around the province. Now, the member mentions a project in Duncan. The member will very well know that we helped fund the project, a similar project in Port Alberni, but we're learning along the way. We're learning along the way of what works, what doesn't work. We know that there's some good things about that type of project, but we also know that there's some challenges that come with that type of work. We know that some of the tiny homes have challenges when it gets too hot. They have some challenges when it's too cold because of the systems. So we're learning from all those processes. And of course, I've met with the Mayor of Duncan. I've met with other mayors who want to find creative solutions for their communities. And my message to them is, yes, let's work together to find it. Because in the end of the day, we don't want people on encampments. We don't want people sleeping on the streets. We want them into housing. And any solution that is worth looking at, we will consider. And many of those solutions we're actually enacting.